Welcome and thank you for coming. Identifying our emotional wounds. We're interested in identifying our life traps. These are emotional wounds that produce fixations that have a tendency to repeat, that in a sense leave us trapped, if you will, in a particular worldview, in a particular self-conception, in particular value system, and also in particular affective states that we are not comfortable with. And we're interested in liberating ourselves from our life traps and our emotional wounds. Why? Because it is the process of maturation, and all of us have this inherent desire to be what we are. And of course, the human condition has a very broad range, from evil to good, for example, vice to virtue. It's a large range. However, we are interested in evolving to greater understanding and greater divine indifference and acceptance of all the difficulties and, of course, all the wonders that come with being alive. So let's move along with this practice. We identify our life traps in numerous fashions. They pursue us and they possess us. This is why we have difficulty identifying them, because we do not have the necessary psychological distance. However, with the practice of meditation, all that changes, and because meditation is non-judgmental, is a non-judgmental oriented perspective that provides psychological distance and also decentering. We do not take our own emotional state and thoughts as personally as we had. That is the maturation process. We get over what at some point in our history was highly compelling and produced a great deal of ruminating and defenses. We're interested in, again, the liberation from psychological suffering. And we recognized that preliminary training in non-duality is very, very helpful. Non-duality meaning the meditative placement of attention. Here's the difference between duality and non-duality. It's that I am not you. That is a dualistic perspective, which is fully valid and operates very, very well. Very necessary. We have to understand there has to be a distinction between ourselves and our environment. I am you and my environment. I am both you and my environment is a non-dual perspective. Here, life is not happening to us, it's simply just happening. We unify the fields, we unify the perceiver and the object of perception into the experience, and we ID with the experience itself. And that experience is not happening to anyone, it is of itself. That is the non-dual perspective. And it provides a great deal of opportunity for maturation, because the maturation process is a process of inclusion. We include and then transcend. We include sometimes bitter realities, sometimes very sweet realities. We include them. These very sweet realities are operated on to normalize them. Same way with our emotional wounds. We normalize them by degree. Why? because it is nature. It is what's happening. It is, so to speak, the norm of life. Now, certain things you may organize as not normal. This does not discredit that perspective, but we must recognize that whatever is occurring in nature is nature itself, and that is what we are operating on. We are indeed interested in swallowing the pill of life itself as best we can, and arriving at a perspective that is generous and insightful. So let's relax completely and do some deep breathing. We'll take 3 deep breaths to relax ourselves. Then I'm going to walk you through an imaginal exposure in which you'll close your eyes and imagine an upsetting event with a parent. This is one way of accessing our emotional wounds. There are many. Let's begin with the expulsion. Breathing in. Big breath. Hold. All the air out. Breathe. Hold your breath. Let's close our eyes. Open the image of an upsetting event with a parent. And when you identify that upsetting event, notice how old you are, where you are. Notice the circumstances and the setting, who you're with. Recall. And expose yourself to those memories. Retrieve, if you can, the emotional experience as best you can. And now in this imaginal exposure, I'd like you to imagine yourself as that child telling the parent what you're experiencing, what they are doing, and what you would prefer. See that happen now. Now recall or generate their response. How are they responding? How is the parent responding? And now gently bring some closure to this imaging and retrieve that healthy parental perspective, that healthy adult that just spoke through the child, bringing it back into your body. Recalling this exercise, however, bringing closure to it. And gently, we're going to let light come back into our eyes. And we're going to think firstly about the theme. Of course, there are many things to think about: the affective state that you experienced, the affective state of the people in the environment, how they're feeling, what's going on with them. And of course, you have just created this capacity to speak up, and you allow yourself to recall that and look at the themes there. Themes may include abandonment, betrayal, emotional deprivation, deprivation of nurturance and support, deprivation of empathy, deprivation of protection. Themes may include subjugation, being overly directed, being overly controlled, brutality, wishing that you were handled better, in a mature, more communicative manner. Many children do not have the experience of having conversations with their parents about their misbehavior. They simply get spanked. And so perhaps this is one of the themes that you are encountering. And so we recognize the presence of emotional wounds. We also recognize the commonality of being emotionally wounded with the rest of humanity. We have a traumatized world, and indeed people are enduring emotional wounds all the time. And so we begin to accept. We begin to accept these events, allowing ourselves to transcend. We include the event and transcend it, attempting to gain perspective on this difficult reality, the reality of being human, being alive. The human condition also, of course, is very broad, from evil to good, from vice to virtue, from misconduct to wonderful conduct. And we incarnate all the cards. We have that potential. So again, you see this acceptance-based approach. We do not ideally forgive. In other words, we say, oh, I ought to forgive. It doesn't work quite that way. Certainly the thought of the idea that the forgiving life transforms life, no doubt about it. However, that process must be organic. That is why we practice ongoing meditation and ongoing compassion towards ourselves and the world, recognizing that indeed we are the world, both subject and object, in one way of looking at it, and that way of looking at it is completely true. Well, thank you for your participation in today's practice. This was the identification of our emotional wound, the identification of our life traps, and we will continue in that modality because insight is so critical in the practice of liberation from psychological suffering. Thank you. Continue to tune in. Our workshop is not over.